In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Okay, we're now come to the very end of the book of 1 Samuel that we've been studying. So God willing, today we're going to finish up the last 3 chapters, and then next week we'll have like a break. We won't have Bible study, and then the following week we'll pick up again, continuing the story actually in 2 Samuel, because 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel are actually one big book that they just broke up into 2 books. So the story continues on in 2 Samuel. Who can tell me what we talked about last time?
Not believing and people and what do you call those people? Fortune tellers. Yeah.
Okay.
Seances and stuff like that.
Right. So the Philistines were getting ready to attack the Israelites, and Saul was trying to find out from God like what to do, and so he asked, but God did not respond. So Saul thought to himself, I'm gonna go and summon the spirit of Samuel, so because he's a prophet who always tells me what God is going to do. So I'll ask him what's happening. Okay. And then what did we say? What happened in this meeting, in this seance?
Samuel. She was able to summon Samuel.
Okay, so it's not really Samuel, but someone appearing to be Samuel. Yeah. And then in the end, he didn't get any kind of message that he wanted to hear. Essentially, he said that he was going to be defeated, and the Philistines are going to take over Israel, and so on. And also, this demon kept pointing out the flaws of Saul and everything that he had done wrong. So we're going to continue today in chapter 29, and again, God willing, we're going to finish the next these 3 chapters today and finish up the book. Okay, so it says, Then the Philistines gathered together all their armies at Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by a fountain which is in Jezreel, and the Lord of the Philistines passed in review by hundreds and by thousands, but David and his men passed in review at the rear with Achish. Okay, so the Philistine army is now getting ready, like mobilizing for battle. Like if you can imagine all like the movies that you've ever seen where there's like, thousands and tens of thousands of soldiers all standing in formation and like in a nice little rectangle, and they're getting ready to go and march forward to fight. It's kind of like this. They're all getting ready. They're standing in formation, and the commander of the Philistines is going around like looking at the army, kind of making sure everyone's in place and that everything is in order and so on. Aphek, which is mentioned here, is right here up in the north. Okay, you can see Aphek is right there, and this valley of Jezreel is like right here in this area under. The Philistines, it says, gathered at Aphek, and the Israelites encamped by the fountain which is in Jezreel, so right next to it. Okay, they're both mobilizing here for war. Then the princes of the Philistines said, What are these Hebrews doing here? So again, the leaders of the Philistines, these princes of the Philistines, went around reviewing, okay, all of the people there, and then they saw David, because remember, what was David doing at this time?
Reviewing, escaping.
David is now living with who? The Philistines. Okay? Now, did David betray Israel? No. But he was just seeking shelter there because Saul is trying to kill him. So what do the Philistines think about him?
He's a traitor.
They think he's a traitor. They think that he's on their side, especially this Achish, okay? This lord of the Philistine named Achish. He's totally convinced that David is his servant and he's going to do whatever he says, and so he's so happy with David, okay? He's like proud that he has David as like his servant. So Achish is coming with his people, okay, to this battle, and he's standing there with them. So when the princes of the Philistines are coming, he's seeing these Hebrew people. Remember, how many people were there with David? 600. So you have these 600 Hebrews that were there, and so the Philistine, like the prince of the Philistines, are confused. It's like, why are these people here with us? What are they doing? So it says, And Achish said to the princes of the Philistines, Is this not David, the servant of Saul, king of Israel, who has been with me these days or these years? And to this day I have found no fault in him, since he defected to me. So he thinks again that David came and defected to him, and he's like putting his trust in Achish, and Achish is protecting him and so on. And he's like proud of this accomplishment, and he's saying, look, this is David. He's the servant of Saul. He's defected, and he's here now, and he's going to help us to win this battle, and he's like thrilled about that. But the princes of the Philistines were angry with him. So the princes of the Philistines said to him, "Make this fellow return, that he may go back to the place which you have appointed for him, and do not let him go down with us to battle, lest in the battle he become our adversary." Okay? For with what could he reconcile himself to his master, if not with the heads of these men? Okay? So the princes of the Philistines are worried. They're saying, no, he can't come with us. Okay? Because what's going to happen now when he enters his own kingdom and his own land? He can betray us. Okay? And he says what? Lest in the battle he become our adversary. Okay? And saying he could reconcile himself to his master. What if he goes and he reconciles himself with Saul again, and now here he is, and he knows our plans, and he's with us like behind the ranks, and he can betray us. This is actually not the first time this happened. If you remember back in 1 Samuel chapter 14, there was another incident where there was a battle between the Hebrews and the Philistines. And at that time, there were Hebrews that had actually defected to the Philistines, and they were living among them. And then at the time when the war began, those Hebrews actually rose up and fought against the Philistines in their own land. Okay, so this isn't like something new. It's something that's happened before. So the princes of the Philistines are very wise in saying, no, you can't do this. I mean, you can't have. So they send David back again. Okay. Is this not David of whom they sang to one another in dances, saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s? Remember, this is the song that the women were singing after David slew Goliath. And this is what made Saul so furious with David, because people were attributing to him that he has slain tens thousands and Saul was only slain thousands. So this is like a well-known song. And that even here in the land of the Philistines, they're remembering it and saying, look, this is David. Here's the one who slew Goliath, which is their own people, right? The Philistine. So why is it that we be trusting him now and having him go with us to battle? Then Achish called David and said to him, surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and your going out and your coming in with me and the army is good in my sight. For to this day I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming to me. Nevertheless, the Lords do not favor you. So Achish is disappointed, and he's telling David, even though like I like you, and even though I trust you, and you've been good to me, the princes of the Philistines, they don't trust you. They don't want you to come with us. They don't favor you. So you have to go back again to the place where they were camped. Okay, remember, who remembers the city where David was? Remember what it was called? No. Endor is where the woman, the medium lady, she was. Remember the name of the city? Ziklag. Good. Ziklag. Okay, and this was a city that was far away from the royal city, so it was like his own area. Okay, that David was. And so he's essentially sending him back to Ziklag again while the battle is going on. Therefore return now and go in peace, that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines. So David said to Achish, but what have I done? And to this day, what have you found in your servant as long as I have been with you, that I may not go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king? Okay. Then Achish answered and said to David, I know that you are as good in my sight as an angel of God. Nevertheless, the princes of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to the battle. Now, it's not clear necessarily what David had in mind. Certainly, David was not going to go attack Saul or the armies of Israel. But he said this statement. It's kind of deceiving almost, because he's making it sound like David is disappointed that he doesn't get to go and fight with Achish, but that really wasn't David's intention at all. Now, therefore, rise early in the morning with your master's servants who have come with you, and as soon as you are up early in the morning, have light, depart. Okay, so he's sending him back. So David and his men rose early to depart in the morning to return to the land of the Philistines, and the Philistines went up to Jezreel, okay, to fight. Okay, that was just chapter 29, very short. Okay, so there's the battle. They're mobilizing for battle, and just essentially just the conversation with about whether David should go to the battle or not. They said no, he shouldn't go to the battle, so he returned back to the Philistine area where he come. Okay, any questions about that? Okay. Now it happened, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag attacked attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire. Okay, now remember, In chapter 27, while David was with the Philistines, what did he do? He went and he kept doing something.
He was attacking the Amalekites, right?
He was attacking the Amalekites, right? Along with others. So the Amalekites now they want revenge from David. He went and he attacked them. So now the Amalekites found the opportunity that they're going to say, okay, David and his people are not here, so I'm going to go and attack their stuff and attack their families because their women and their children and so on are there still in the camp. So they went and attacked and had taken captive the women and those who were there from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, and their daughters had been taken captive. Okay, so everything of theirs, all their possessions, all their families, everything was taken. Okay, this is, of course, like a horrible, horrible catastrophe for David and his 600 men that were with him. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept, until they had no power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Okay, so even David's two wives, remember, Abigail was the wife of Nabal that he had taken to be his wife after he died, and then the other wife, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, that we read about her also in that same chapter about Abigail. Those two wives of his were living with him because he married them while he was in exile, as opposed to his first wife, which was Michal, who was Saul's daughter, that was no longer his wife. She married someone else. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Okay, so like here we're in a situation where it's like a huge setback for David. All his family, all his possessions, everything was taken with him. But even in that moment, like of despair, what does it say about him?
David strengthened himself in God.
David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And this is really the key for success for David. If you look at the life of David, you don't find that it was an easy life by any means. You don't find that it was a life free from pain or suffering or distress or hardship. But you do find that in everything David comforts himself in God and seeks the guidance of God and accepts the will of God. Those are the keys to successful life. Okay? Is that you accept the will of God when it comes, is that you seek comfort in God when things are difficult. That's what's going to make David and us able to cope, because it's not that we're relying on the fact that there are no problems in our lives. There's always going to be problems. There's going to be things that is out of our control. And this is a major catastrophe. And yet, despite of this, David maintained his trust in God and strengthened himself in his God. Then David said to Abiathar, the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring the ephod here to me. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. Okay, so now David is wanting to inquire of the Lord and to ask him, what is this that's going to happen? What should I do? So David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for you should surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So this was a great response that David got from God, because essentially he's telling him, go and pursue, and you will restore back everything, and even all of your family and your children and your wives and everything. You will recover everything without fail. So David is now going to act and do this. So David went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David pursued, he and 400 men. For 200 stayed behind who were so weary that they could not cross the brook Besor. So remember, these people, they had just traveled from Aphek, which was where the battle was going to be, and they had just returned back again to their own home in Ziklag. So again, if you look at where this is here on the map, okay, Aphek is way up here in the north, okay, if you can see that up here. Ziklag is way down here in the south. So David's men started in Ziklag. They went up all the way to Aphek for the battle. Then they were rejected from fighting the battle, so they went all the way back down to Ziklag again. So of course they're exhausted, Okay, and now when they get home, they find out that the Amalekites, see, the nation of Amalek is here, down here. So that Amalek, they had come up to Ziklag, and they had plundered everything that they had, and took their families, and they brought them back down again. So right here, there's this brook, this small river called Bisor Brook. Okay, and so they were going to have to come down, cross this brook, and find where the camp was, and take all of their things and go back up to Ziklag again. So, I mean, for those who are extremely exhausted, it's a very difficult mission, and it's a very, very difficult timing because they had just come back from a long journey. So the plan is they were going to leave the 200 behind that were too exhausted to continue, but the 400 other ones were going to go. Then, on their way to the brook, they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. And they gave him bread, and he ate, and they let him drink water. So they found this Egyptian man in the field, and he was hungry and thirsty, and so they offered him, out of goodness. I mean, there was no real reason they had to. They just offered him bread and water so that he could eat and drink. And they gave him a piece of cake figs and 2 clusters of raisins. So when he had eaten, his strength came back to him, for he had eaten no bread nor drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. This actually is a commandment of God, that God had told the Israelites that they need to be kind to foreigners and strangers that dwell among them. In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 34, it says, "The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." So David was very compassionate in helping this man, even though it was a very stressful time for him. I mean, they were frantically trying to go and return all that they had. They could have said, "Well, we don't care about this man on the road. Just let him fend for himself. We have no obligation to him." And yet, we see that they were compassionate to him. And as it turned out, that this man was the reason why they actually were able to recover everything. Okay. Then David said to him, "To whom do you belong, and where are you from?" He was a slave, an Egyptian slave. And he said, "I am a young man from Egypt, servant of an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because 3 days ago I fell sick." Okay, so his master is an Amalekite, so he knows where the Amalekites are, and he was left behind because he was sick. "We made an invasion of the southern area of the Cherethites, in the territory which belongs to Judah, and the southern area of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire." So he's actually among the people that went and burned his city with fire. And David said to him, "Can you take me down to this troop?" So he said, "Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this troop." Okay, so one interesting thing is the way that he's speaking here to David. He says, "Swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me." Okay, so which God is he speaking about?
David's God.
David's God. Because what did the Egyptians believe?
They believed in the Egyptian gods.
Many gods, right? They believed in many gods. So here when he's saying, "Swear to me by God," he's saying what? I know because you're a Hebrew, I know that God is very important to you, and the way that you respect your God and the way you revere him. So if you swear to me by your God, then I know that you will remain faithful to what it is that you say. Even though the Egyptian doesn't believe in this God. Okay? And it says something.
Didn't Achish say something to David before him? It was like, surely as the Lord lives, but yeah, Achish calls David and says, "Sure as the Lord lives, you've been upright, and you're going out and coming in, and the army has been good in my sight." So is he also saying it by the Jewish God, or the God of David?
You read it again?
He says, "Then Achish called David and said to him, surely as the Lord lives, you have been upright, and you're going out and you're coming in with me, and the army is good in my sight. For to this day I have not found evil in you since the day of your coming to me. Nevertheless, the Lord does not favor you."
Yeah. So the Philistines, they believed in the God of Hebrews, but they didn't believe in him as being like the only God. Right? So they had their own God, whose name was Dagon, and then they believed that the Hebrews had their own God. And essentially, when they fought against each other, it was like who has the more powerful God. That's why originally, if we remember at the very beginning of the book of First Samuel, when the Philistines were fighting the Israelites and they captured the Ark of the Covenant, okay, what did they do?
They put it in there.
In the temple, right? Okay, and they did that as a sign that Dagon has like overpowered their god. Okay, so yeah, I mean at this time, in fact, everyone in the world at this time believed in more than one god, except for the Hebrews. That's why the Hebrews was so different. It was so it was so different than any other nation. The fact that you only believe in one God, and that God is everything. The other nations, they believed that there was something supernatural. They believed that, and they believed that there was a god of the water and a god of the sun and a god of the moon and a god of all these things. But to believe that there was only one, and that one God was so powerful that he created everything, that was difficult for people to comprehend, to understand. The other thing that was difficult for them to understand was that your God, doesn't have any physical form, right? The people believe that, our God is with us when we have an idol of him. And this is our God with us because we can see him and touch him and talk to him and so on. Whereas in the God of the Hebrews had no physical form. There was no idol. And actually that's against the second commandment. What is the difference between the first commandment and the second commandment? What is the first commandment?
You're not going to worship other gods.
It's written up here on the wall. Yeah. Yeah, worship the Lord your God only, right? So you're going to worship God only. Okay? Okay, so that's essentially saying don't worship idols, don't worship other gods, only worship the Lord your God. Okay? What's the second commandment? This thing is kind of worded in a strange way. Huh?
This one is for kids.
Yeah. Well, that's the first one.
Don't worship curved image.
Do not make a carved image. Okay? Do not make an image of God. So what's the difference? Is making an image of God the same thing as worshiping other gods?
No, but it just means don't make a material form of him.
Exactly. So the first one is, I'm the only God, don't worship any other God but me. The second commandment is, when you worship me, don't worship me by making an idol. Don't worship me through an idol. Don't make an idol that represents me and then worship it.
Do we do that?
No, we don't worship. What do we worship?
What do you mean? We have statues.
We have an altar.
We don't worship the altar. And we don't worship statues. Okay? The icons, for instance, first of all, we don't use statues in the church. We use icons. But in even the icons, like even an icon of Christ, for instance, we don't worship that icon. Okay? That icon is a representation of God whom we worship. But we're not worshiping like if that icon, like for instance, if the church burned down, God forbid, that icon would get burned down. We wouldn't say God was burned, right? Because that icon is not God. That icon is a representation of God. And we use it to remind ourselves of God, but it is not God himself. Whereas in these religions, the idol was God for them. Okay? So, for instance, in the when Moses came down from the mountain, after he received the Ten Commandments, what did he find the people doing?
Praising the golden calf.
And what did Aaron say to them about the golden calf? This is your God who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So how could that be? How is it that this is your God? Well, they made this calf because Moses was gone for so long, and they're like, where's Moses? And he's the only one who talks with God for us, and where's God? Like, we don't know where he is because Moses isn't here, and he's the only one that can communicate with God. So we're going to make a calf, and we're going to worship it. Because now we have something physical that we can communicate with, that we can see. This is the God. This is the God who brought us up out of the land of Egypt. And this is what God told them not to do. Okay? So this is the difference between the Jewish religion at this time, which was the only monotheistic religion at the time, compared to all these nations that are around them were all polytheistic. Okay? And that's why they rubbed each other the wrong way. Okay? Actually, even in the New Testament, the Romans, they were also polytheists, right? They had so many different gods. And whenever they would go and conquer different nations, they would have to figure out what they're going to do about their religion, okay? So what they did is they essentially said, because everybody was polytheistic, they said, okay, the gods that you worship, we worship them too, but we just have different names for them. So for instance, uh, every country or every people, they would have like a god of war, okay? The Ares god of war, or sorry, the Greek god of war is Ares. The Roman god of war is Mars. Okay, so essentially, when they would take them over, they say, "Oh yeah, what you call Ares, we just call him Mars, but we worship the same." For instance, Zeus, who was the leader of the gods in the Greek mythology, is Jupiter in the Roman mythology. So they didn't have any problem. But until they came to Israel and they conquered Israel, and now Israel is like a province of the Roman Empire. Well, what do? You believe there's only one God? We can't coexist. Our religions can't coexist, and that's why there was always tension between the Romans in terms of their belief and the Israelites in terms of their belief. So here, um, the this Egyptian slave acknowledges the uniqueness of the relationship between David and his God, and so he's saying, if you swear to me by your God, I will believe you. Okay. So we have to also ask ourselves like this question about us. It's like when we are out in the world, are people seeing us and saying, you know what, our God for us is as important as God is to David? That when we are operating in the world, that people know that we believe in God, and they know that our relationship with God is, uncompromisable. Like, there's nothing we're going to compromise with our relationship with God, because we will develop such a reputation. We will either develop a reputation where people know that our faith is non-negotiable, or we'll have a reputation which is essentially saying that our faith is kind of, not that important. Okay, so it's important for us to take that seriously. And when he had brought him down, there they were, spread out over all the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. So the Amalekites are having a party because they're so joyful about everything they had just captured and conquered. Then David attacked them from twilight until evening of the next day. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. He attacked them the entire day. So David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives. And nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything which they had taken from them. David recovered all. Then David took all the flocks and herds they had driven before those other livestock, and said, "This is David's spoil." Okay, so now they not only conquered and got all their own stuff, but now they have all of the spoil that was there that wasn't even their own, that now they're going to take for themselves. So they're going to start like dividing up this spoil. Now David came to the 200 men who had been so weary that they could not follow David, whom they also had made to stay at the brook Besor. So they went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near the people, he greeted them. Okay, so all the group of people now are taking all of this spoil that they captured, including all of their own things, and they're returning back again to Ziklag, and they're crossing over again this brook of Besor, just as they did the first time. And so they meet the 200 people that they left behind because they were too weary. Then all the wicked and worthless men of those who went with David answered and said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except for every man's wife and children, that they may lead them away and depart." Okay, what's happening?
As John Smith said, he who does not work does not eat.
Okay, so they're saying, you know what, these people did not come with us to the battle, and so they should have no share in the spoil. Okay? So what do you think?
Well, I mean, anytime when you do a lot of work and you get a reward for it, and then you or found out that you have to like give a part of it to someone else, I mean, there's gonna be a part of you that's gonna be at least, I mean, it's not gonna like it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and some people will really not like it. So these are the people who really don't like it. They're like, no, we're not giving them to you. You know, but I think it's kind of. Yeah.
If David did, it would encourage more laziness. Like rewarding the slackness.
No, but these are the. It says all the wicked and worthless men who went with David answered and said, it wasn't David. It was the wicked and worthless men.
But you're saying if he gave them the spoil, then it would encourage laziness?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like rewarding.
So, anyway, what does other people think?
So like,
Oh, sorry, I got confused. I thought it's talking about the 200 who left behind. I got confused.
Oh, no, it's the wicked and worthless men of the 400 that went and fought.
Okay.
The ones that actually fought in the battle, they're the ones coming and saying, those who did not go with us, we should not give them anything, except for their own families.
Why did some of them not go?
They were too tired to go because they had just gone to Aphek, where they were going to fight with Israel, and then that's when they were sent back, and they came all the way back, and they said they were too weary to go.
So they're referring to the 200
Yeah,
that they left behind?
yeah.
That's the what I said then.
No, I mean, I think this goes back to, I mean, this goes similar to the parable that Jesus said about
The talents.
The talents is like everyone who works the entire day, you know, they get one talent, like whether they were working from the beginning or whether they just started working like right at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people who were working the entire day, they were like, well, what the heck? Like the people, they work for like 3 seconds. We work the entire day.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, first of all, it's not yours to give, and second of all, like this is the reward for everyone, regardless. You know, I think it's the same thing. Just how.
So in the parable, you're talking about the parable of the workers of the 11th hour.
Yeah.
In that parable, the people who came at the 11th hour, they were just lazy. You know, they were just people who, you know, didn't want to work. Like if you have someone who comes and comes to work at 5 p.m., you know, that's a person who's not really serious about work. You know, so that person who comes with that attitude, when he gets paid the same wage as someone who was up at 6 o'clock in the morning, then you can see why someone would be upset about that.
Right.
But is that the same situation here?
I don't think so, because the 200 did what they could, and I mean, it said they were weary and tired. So I mean, I feel like maybe that they did what they could to their ability, but there just so happened to be 400 that were able to do more.
Right. So the fact that those 200 stayed didn't mean that they were staying for a wrong reason. I mean, they physically couldn't, and they did go to war. They went to war the first time at Aphek, and then they came back again. So it's not like they're people that just don't want to do anything and don't want to fight, and you know, they went and came back, but then they couldn't. So David is like instituting kind of like a system, which was actually used from then on, which was everybody participates in the spoil, but everybody has different abilities. Okay, it's kind of like saying, you know, if somebody is a soldier is fighting in battle, and then right at the very beginning of the battle he gets injured, and he has to leave the battlefield, and he spends the rest of the battle in the hospital. In the end, is he not going to partake of the spoils of the war simply because he got injured at the very beginning? His heart was in the right place, but that's just the fact. This is what happened. So with these, and this is why he calls them wicked and worthless men, they were considering that they were the ones who were victorious, and that the credit of the victory belongs to them. And because the credit of the victory belongs to them, then they're the ones that should be rewarded. Instead of thinking about it the way David thinks about it. David thinks about it in terms of God is the one who brought us the victory. Whether you 400 people were the ones who were fighting or not, God is the one who brought us the victory, and so we all share together in the reward. Okay. But David said, "My brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us, who has preserved us and delivered into our hand the troop that came against us." So saying, you don't deserve this more than they deserve it. Okay, we're all in this together, and God is the one who brought us the victory. "For who will heed you in this matter? But as his part is who goes down to the battle. so shall his part be who stays by the supplies, and they all share alike. So it was from that day forward, he made it a statute and an ordinance for Israel to this day. So it became kind of like a rule in the military in Israel that everybody shares together. The people that stay with the supplies receive the same as the people that go into battle. And when you think about it, even in the modern military, it has to be like that. Not every single person is an infantry soldier who's in the army. You have people who, if I was ever in the army, I wouldn't be doing that. So, I mean, you have people that have to run the equipment, and you have the medical people, and you have like all the administrative people, and you need all of that for the army to function. Chaplain, yes. Right. So what David is saying is all those people are equally important. Okay, it's not just the people on the front line that should get of the spoil. Now, when David came to Ziklag, back home again, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, to his friends, saying, "Here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord, to those who are in Bethel, those who are in Ramoth of the south, those who are in Jeter, those who are in Eror, those who are in Ziphmoth, those who are in Eshitoma, those who are in Rakal, those who are in the cities of the Jeremites, those who are in the cities of the Kenites, those who are in Hormah, those who are in Korashan, and those who are in Athach, those who are in Hebron, and to all the places where David himself and his men were accustomed to rove." Okay, so what did he do? So you can kind of see where all these places are. Okay, they're spread out all over the place. Okay, so there's Bethel over there, and then you have Hebron is here, and Eshtemoa is here, and Jeter is here, Hormah is down here. Places all over the country he took of the spoils. So not only did David give up to the 600 people who are with him, he gave of the plunder to the entire nation. Okay, what is that? Why did he do that?
So that like he could be like in their favor, I'm guessing, for future reference.
Okay, so one reason is he wants their favor. Okay, that's one reason. What else?
Just generosity in general.
Okay,
Well, this is like the stuff from the Amalekites, right? So then the Amalekites, where they was fighting and raiding stuff from Israel, maybe it was theirs.
okay, it's possible like he wants to return the things that that they had originally taken from Israel, perhaps. Okay.
Show them God is with
Okay, to show them God is with them, but more specifically along that line.
like God is with them.
Yes, that God is with David. If you remember when we talked about why David went and fought the Amalekites to begin with, remember we said this Amalekites, what they did was a revenge on David attacking them. Why did David attack them to begin with?
So that he could show that he was attacking Judah, right? Or attacking the southern part of Israel, but he's not.
But did he have to go and fight at all?
He was fulfilling the commandment of God to the Israelites.
Yes. So which commandment was he fulfilling?
Take all the land of
Of Canaan, this whole area, the land of Canaan. So specifically, God told all the people, destroy all of the enemies of Israel, and the Amalekites were one of them. So when David goes and fights the Amalekites, like what does he have to gain? I mean, if you think about it from David's perspective, he's already on the run. He just wants to kind of like lay low and let things kind of settle. There's no personal motivation for David when he's hiding in the land of the Philistines to decide go on a raid to go and fight the Amalekites. Like he doesn't even have like a formal position. He doesn't have equipment. He doesn't have things like he's there's no reason for him to do that. So the reason is because he was fulfilling the commandment of God. God had told the Israelites from long ago that they should destroy all the enemies of Israel. And so David, when he had this opportunity, he decided to go and to fulfill this commandment to destroy the enemies of Israel. So what he's doing on the behalf of the whole country. He's not doing it on his own for his own purposes, right? So because he's doing this on behalf of the whole country should receive the reward of his success. Because this is a God-given mission. This is not just his own personal mission. Okay? Yeah. All right. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like, okay, David attacked the Amalekites before. Like, why didn't he like take the spoil then?
Well, I mean, he can take the spoil of what he found, but this could be like he didn't necessarily wipe out the whole nation at once, right? So he could have taken the spoil and he did, if you remember. Who did he give the spoil to?
To
Achish. So he fought in one area, the Amalekites took the spoil and gave it to Achish, but now this is a different group.
okay.
Yeah.
They had a lot of spoil they gave to all those cities.
Yeah. I mean, it's an entire country.
Yeah, but they had just like plundered other areas too, so that's probably why they had so much.
So this is the last chapter in 1 Samuel, and this is finally when we read about the death of Saul. So remember, while all this stuff is happening in the meantime, okay, we have the battle of the Philistines and the Israelites. The one that they were about to do, the one that David left, okay, that's still ongoing, while all this is happening. So it says, now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Okay, so the Israelites are losing, okay, against the Philistines. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. Okay, so the Philistines are specifically targeting Saul and his family. Okay, so they went and they killed his sons, including Jonathan. Jonathan dies here. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. So Saul did not want to be subject to what the Philistines were going to do to him if they captured him. Especially because he calls them the uncircumcised men, meaning these are godless men, and he doesn't want to be captured by these enemies of God and to be subject to their torture or whatever it is that they're going to do to him. So he wants to end his life. So he tells this armor-bearer that is with him to kill him, but the armor-bearer refuses to do so, and so he kills himself. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that same day. And when the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley, and those who were on the other side of the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. So the cities, the Israelite cities that were in the nearby area where this was happening, when they saw that Saul had lost this battle, they actually fled from their cities because they were worried that the Philistines were going to come and attack their cities next. They fled from their cities, and so the Philistines, they came and they found these cities are empty. They, and they're ready for them to take, so they just took and occupied the cities. Okay, it had always been kind of like a back and forth on the border between Philistines and Israel. Sometimes the Philistines would overtake and take some of the cities, and other times the Israelites would overtake and take the cities back. So here they just abandoned these cities, and the Philistines took them. So it happened the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. And they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent word throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim it in the temple of their idols and among the people. So it's like a trophy for them now. Okay? They cut off his head so they could, go and show it that now we've actually killed Saul. Like, this is not just a rumor. We've actually killed him. This is like the thing that they've been trying to do for so long. They've finally been able to do it. Then they put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shan. You guys remember what the Ashtoreths are?
It's not the same temple that they put the Ark of the Covenant in, is it?
So that temple was a temple for Dagon. You remember? So there was like two categories of gods. Okay, so there's what's called the Baals. The Baal is actually not a name of a specific god, but Baal means like my master. So it's like a category of male gods. Okay, so they had like male and female gods. The male gods were the Baals, and the female gods were the Ashtoreths. Okay, so they had the temple for these Ashtoreth gods, and they put his armor there as a trophy. And they also put his whole body there on this wall for people to come and see it. Now when the inhabitants of Jabish Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and traveled all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Beth Shan, and they came to Jabesh and burned them there. Okay, do you remember when we last heard about Jabish Gilead? Who were these people? It's in 1 Samuel 11 is when we first heard about them.
Was it the people like David's dad and brothers, or?
No. So
Oh, that's the, hold on. I can just read it. But then Nahash the Ammonite came up and encamped against Jabish Gilead. And all the men of Jabish said to Nashad, "Make a covenant with us, and we will serve you." And Nashad the Amorite answered them, "On this condition I'll make a covenant with you."
yeah, so what had happened, this was long ago, this was before Saul had been rejected as being king by God. The Ammonites, which were another neighboring people on the east side of Israel, they came and they were attacking the city, Jabesh Gilead. Okay, and so they threatened to put out the eyes of everyone that's in the city. And Saul actually came to the rescue, okay, and saved them. So these people of Jabesh Gilead were very loyal to Saul because they had personally been saved by him. So they were the ones willing to take this risk and going and getting back his body and the bodies of his sons again from the Philistine territory, and they returned it and they burned them, kind of as an honorable cremation, yeah. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Okay, and that is the last we hear about Saul here in this chapter. And then in 2 Samuel, we focus more on the rebuilding of the kingdom under David and how things progress. And we read a lot about all the military leaders that David has and stories about them and what happened with them and the battles that they fought and so on. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so again, next week we won't be having the Bible study, but then we'll resume 2 Samuel the week after. God bless. And glory be to God forever, amen.